I once knew a master architect who designed buildings to withstand earthquakes. He told me, "You don't fight the shaking. You teach the building how to move with it, how to be flexible in its foundation so that it becomes stronger under pressure." He wasn't just talking about steel and concrete. He was describing the blueprint for an unshakable human mind. Welcome. Take a deep breath. Settle into your space, because for the next 2 hours, we are not going to add anything to your life. We are not here to give you more tasks, more goals, more ambitions to chase. Instead, we are here to build something within you, something permanent. We are here to become architects of the self. Think about the world we live in. It is a world of constant tremors. The ground beneath our feet is never still. The news cycle delivers a new jolt every hour. Our social media feeds present 1,000 tiny quakes of comparison, envy, and outrage. Our professional lives demand more, faster, now. Our personal lives are filled with the unpredictable movements of relationships, health, and finance. We are, in every sense, living in a seismic zone. And how do most of us respond? We try to control the earthquake. We try to stop the ground from shaking. We frantically try to manage every outcome, control every opinion, and predict every turn of events. We build our lives out of rigid materials, unyielding expectations, brittle attachments, and a desperate need for the world to conform to our desires. And so, when the inevitable tremor comes, a job loss, a difficult diagnosis, a betrayal, or even just a day where everything seems to go wrong, our structures don't just crack, they shatter. The result is anxiety, burnout, frustration, and a pervasive sense that we are utterly powerless. But the ancient Stoic philosophers, men like Seneca, Epictetus, and the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, understood a profound truth. They knew that wisdom isn't about preventing the earthquake. Wisdom is about building a structure within yourself that is so sound, so well-designed, so deeply rooted in principle, that it can withstand any tremor the world throws at it. They understood that you don't find peace by silencing the world. You find it by cultivating a quiet, unconquerable citadel within your own mind. This is the promise of our time together. This is the blueprint I intend to share with you. Over the course of this journey, we will explore the 9 Stoic laws of an unshakable mind. These are not abstract philosophical concepts for dusty lecture halls. These are practical architectural principles for modern life. They are the load-bearing walls, the flexible foundations, and the serene inner courtyards of a mind that cannot be broken. By the time our journey is complete, you will possess a new understanding of what you can and cannot control. You will learn to see obstacles not as barriers, but as raw material for strength. You will make peace with the transient nature of life, find purpose in your every action, and disarm anger and anxiety before they have a chance to really take root. You will walk away from this experience not with a list of things to do, but with a new way of being. You will have the complete blueprint to construct your own inner fortress, your own unshakable mind.
So, let the world shake. Let the tremors come. We are about to learn how to build a soul that knows how to move with them, a mind that finds its strength not in resisting the chaos, but in mastering the art of inner stillness. Let us lay the first stone. Law 1. The law of the inner citadel. The first and most foundational law, the very bedrock upon which our entire structure rests, is this: the law of the inner citadel. It is the simple yet life-altering recognition of what is truly ours and what is not. The ancient Stoics called this the dichotomy of control. It states that some things in life are within our control and some things are not. True wisdom and the peace that comes with it is found in knowing the difference and focusing all our energy on the former. What is within our control? Our thoughts, our judgments, our choices, our responses, our actions, our character. This is our inner kingdom, the citadel of the self. It is the only territory where we are the absolute sovereign. What is not within our control? Everything else. The weather, the economy, traffic, the past, the future. What other people think of us, whether they like us, whether our project succeeds or fails in the marketplace, our health in the long run, our very mortality. This is the vast, untamable wilderness outside the citadel walls. The modern mind is driven to madness by its constant attempt to conquer the wilderness. We exhaust ourselves trying to command the reins, to will the traffic to part, to force others to see our worth. We tie our happiness to the shifting sands of external outcomes. When the stock market goes up, we are elated. When it goes down, we are crushed. When we receive praise, we feel validated. When we receive criticism, we feel diminished. We have, in essence, handed the keys to our inner citadel over to the unpredictable chaos of the outside world. The first law of building an unshakable mind is to reclaim those keys. It is to draw a firm, clear line in the sand of our consciousness and declare, my energy, my attention, and my peace of mind will be invested only in what is mine to command. Consider the story of Leo, a brilliant young software developer working at a competitive tech startup. For months, his entire life had been consumed by a single project, the launch of a new app he had poured his heart and soul into. His identity had become fused with its success. In the weeks leading up to the launch, Leo was a ghost haunting the office. He barely slept. He lived on caffeine and anxiety. He wasn't worried about the things he could control. The code was elegant, the design was intuitive, the functionality was flawless. He had done his work, and he had done it well. No, Leo was tormented by the wilderness. He obsessed over tech bloggers and what they might write. Would they understand the vision? Would they compare it unfavorably to a competitor? He agonized over the market. Was it the right time to launch? Would a sudden economic downturn make consumers hesitant? He scrolled endlessly through social media, trying to gauge the buzz, his mood swinging violently with every positive or negative comment from a total stranger. He was trying to control the earthquake. His mentor, a senior engineer named Anya, who had seen dozens of launches, watched him with a gentle concern. A few days before the launch, she found him staring blankly at his screen at 2 a.m., his face pale with exhaustion. "Leo," she said softly, placing a cup of tea on his desk, "the app is ready, but you are not." "I can't turn my brain off," he confessed, his voice ragged. "What if it fails, Anya? What if they hate it? All this work, for nothing." Anya pulled up a chair. "Tell me," she said, "can you control what Sarah from TechCrunch will write in her review tomorrow?" "No," Leo admitted. "Can you control whether a bug in a competitor's app will make them release a patch on the same day, stealing our headlines?" "No." "Can you control if 1,000 people sign up on day 1 or 10? Leo shook his head, a sense of despair washing over him. "No. It's all just a gamble." "Exactly," Anya said, her voice firm but kind. "You are trying to command the wind. You have built a beautiful ship, Leo. The craftsmanship is superb. The sails are strong. The hull is sound. You have done your work. But you cannot control the ocean. No sailor can. A wise sailor focuses only on his duties, trimming the sails, manning the rudder, reading the charts. He does his job with excellence, and he accepts the weather as it comes. His pride is not in the destination he reaches, but in how he sailed the ship." She pointed to his monitor. Your code, your problem solving, your dedication, your collaboration with the team, that is your ship. That is your inner citadel. Your work was to build it to the best of your ability. You have done that. That is the victory. The number of downloads, the reviews, the revenue, that is the weather. It is not you. It does not define the quality of your work or the value of your effort. Anya's words landed with the force of a revelation. Leo looked at his hands, at the keyboard where he had spent countless hours. For the first time in months, he separated the effort from the outcome. He had conflated the two, making his self-worth entirely dependent on factors he could never command. He went home that night and slept for 8 hours straight. The next day, he came into the launch not with a frantic, desperate anxiety, but with a quiet, calm pride. He focused on what he could control, monitoring the servers, fixing minor bugs that popped up, communicating clearly with his team. The launch was not a runaway success. It was moderate. Some reviews were glowing, others were mixed. The user numbers were decent, but not world-shattering. A year prior, this result would have crushed Leo. He would have seen it as a personal failure, a reflection of his own inadequacy. But now, standing in his inner citadel, he felt a profound sense of peace. He had sailed his ship well. He had done his work with virtue and excellence. The weather had been fair, not perfect, and that was perfectly fine. He had found the unshakable ground of his own actions, and he let the wilderness of outcomes rage as it would. He was free.
This is the first law. Every day, every hour, you must practice this separation. When you feel anxiety, frustration, or fear, ask yourself this simple question. Is this thing that is upsetting me within my control or outside of it? If it is outside your control, another person's opinion, a past mistake, a future uncertainty, then your work is to acknowledge it and then consciously withdraw your energy from it. It is not your territory. Your territory is your response. Your territory is the character you choose to display in this moment. Your territory is your next action. Build the walls of your inner citadel high and strong, not to keep the world out, but to keep your peace in. Law 2. The law of perceptive reframing. Once we have established the firm foundation of our citadel by understanding what we can and cannot control, we must learn to manage the events that breach its walls, the unavoidable challenges and hardships of life. The second law governs this process. It is the law of perceptive reframing, a principle the Stoics summarized in the powerful phrase, "The obstacle is the way." This law teaches that the events of the world are, in themselves, neutral. They are objective facts. A lost job is a lost job. A medical diagnosis is a medical diagnosis. A failed relationship is a failed relationship. These are not inherently good or bad. It is our perception, the story we tell ourselves about these events, that color them with the vibrant hues of tragedy or opportunity. An unshakable mind does not waste its energy wishing the obstacle was not there. It does not curse its fate or mourn the smooth path it has been denied. Instead, it asks a different, more powerful question. How can I use this? What virtue can I practice because of this? What strength can this obstacle help me forge? The obstacle ceases to be a roadblock and becomes raw material. A difficult boss is no longer a source of daily misery, but a training ground for patience and professionalism. A sudden financial setback is not a catastrophe, but a lesson in resilience, humility, and the true meaning of wealth. A physical injury is not the end of a journey, but an unexpected detour that can lead to the discovery of new strengths and passions. This is not a call for toxic positivity or pretending that pain does not exist. The pain is real. The loss is real. The law of perceptive reframing does not deny the initial shock. It simply governs our response to it. It is the alchemy of the mind, the ability to take the lead of adversity and transmute it into the gold of character. Let us consider the story of Clara, a guitarist whose entire world was built around the 10 fingers on her hands. From the age of 12, the guitar was more than an instrument. It was her voice, her confidant, her identity. She had a rare talent, a fluid, intricate style that was beginning to get her noticed in the competitive music scene. Her life was a clear, ascending melody heading towards a crescendo of success. One rainy Tuesday, that melody came to a screeching halt. A careless driver ran a red light, and in the ensuing crash, Clara's left hand was severely injured. Multiple surgeries followed, but the diagnosis was stark and unforgiving. While she would regain most of the hand's function for everyday life, the fine motor control, the lightning-fast dexterity required to fly across a fretboard, was gone forever.
The news was not an obstacle. It was a wall. A sheer, unscalable cliff face had appeared in the middle of her path. For months, Clara was lost in a silent, colorless world. Her beloved guitars gathered dust in their cases, monuments to a life that was now impossible. Her friends' well-meaning words of encouragement, "You'll find something else, everything happens for a reason," felt like hollow echoes in the vast emptiness of her loss. Her perception was locked on one story: my life is over. The best part of me is dead. One afternoon, sitting in her quiet apartment, overwhelmed by a wave of despair, she found herself humming. It was a simple, melancholic tune, a wordless expression of her grief. Without thinking, she pulled out her phone and recorded it. The next day, another melody came, and another. They were just fragments, musical sighs. She began to listen back to these recordings. The melodies were raw, but they were powerful. They had a character and an emotional depth that her guitar playing, for all its technical brilliance, had sometimes lacked. A thought, small and fragile, began to form in her mind. The thought was not, "This is as good as the guitar." It was a different thought entirely. "This is something else." She started to play with the melodies on a simple music production app. She layered them, added simple harmonies, and found that she had a natural instinct for arrangement. Then, tentatively, she began to add words. The lyrics poured out of her, stories of loss, of resilience, of seeing the world through new eyes. The obstacle, the unscalable wall of her injury, had not disappeared, but by shifting her perception, Clara had found a hidden door in it. The injury had taken her fingers, but in doing so, it had forced her to find her true voice. Her focus had always been on the instrument. Now it was on the music itself. She spent the next year not as a guitarist who couldn't play, but as a composer and a songwriter who was just beginning. She collaborated with other musicians, including a young guitarist who played with a fire she deeply admired. She became the mind behind the music, the source of the melody, and the soul of the lyrics. 2 years after her accident, an album was released. It was a collection of songs written by Clara, sung by a vocalist she had discovered, with guitar parts played by her young protégé. The album received critical acclaim for its haunting melodies and its profoundly honest songwriting. Critics praised the old soul quality of the music, its wisdom and emotional maturity. Clara, listening to her songs on the radio, felt a sense of peace she had never known, even at the height of her guitar-playing prowess. Her injury had not been a gift, it was a tragedy. But her response to it, her alchemical act of perceptive reframing, had created a beauty and a depth in her that might otherwise have remained dormant forever. She hadn't gotten over the obstacle, she had gone through it, and in doing so, she had become more herself than she had ever been before. This is the power of the second law. Life will present you with walls. Your first reaction is human, to feel the pain, the anger, the injustice. But your second reaction is the one that defines you. Look at the wall, feel its rough texture, acknowledge its imposing size, and then ask the question, what is the way through? What hidden door does this obstacle conceal? What new strength will I build in learning to climb it? The event is not the story. You are the storyteller. Reframe the narrative, and you change your world.
Law 3. The law of impermanence. Having established our foundation and learned to reframe obstacles, we must now confront the very nature of the material we are building with, life itself. The third law is perhaps the most sobering, yet ultimately the most liberating. It is the law of impermanence, encapsulated in the Stoic practice of memento mori. Remember, you will die. In our modern culture, this may sound morbid, a dark obsession with the end. But for the Stoics, it was the opposite. It was a tool of profound liberation and a catalyst for vibrant, meaningful life. The constant, gentle awareness of our own mortality and the impermanence of everything around us is not meant to inspire fear, but to inspire urgency, gratitude, and priority. When we forget that our time is finite, we live as if we have 1,000 years. We postpone joy. We hold grudges. We sweat the small stuff. We chase trivialities, a petty argument, a minor social slight, the accumulation of things we don't need. We live in a state of someday I'll travel, someday I'll forgive them, someday I'll spend more time with my family, someday I'll appreciate the simple beauty of a sunrise. Memento mori cuts through this delusion like a razor. It holds every action, every thought, every day up to the ultimate standard. If this were my last day on earth, is this how I would choose to spend it? Is this argument worth my final breath? Is this anxiety over a future that may never come the best use of my precious, limited consciousness? Is scrolling through the curated lives of others how I want to spend my final moments? The answer is almost always a resounding no. The awareness of death is the key that unlocks the door to life. It strips away the non-essential. It clarifies our values. It forces us to live in the present moment, because the present moment is the only one we are ever guaranteed to have. It is the ultimate antidote to procrastination and the ultimate source of meaning.
Then, at the age of 52, he received a diagnosis. It was a serious, but, the doctors assured him, highly treatable form of cancer. For the first time since he was a child, the meticulously planned future of Marcus Thorne evaporated. It was replaced by a fog of uncertainty, of chemotherapy schedules, and of confronting his own fragile mortality. The diagnosis was the loudest memento mori he could have received. In the quiet hours of his recovery, the structure of his life, which had seemed so solid, revealed itself to be a house of cards. His legacy? The soaring stock price? The respect of his peers? In the face of his own impermanence, these things felt like sand slipping through his fingers. What rushed in to fill the void was the memory of 1,000 small, postponed moments. The time his son had asked him to come see a model rocket he'd built, and Marcus had said he was too busy preparing for a call. The time his daughter had tried to show him a song she'd learned on the piano, and he'd waved her away, his mind on a merger. The vacation his wife had planned, a simple trip to a cabin by a lake, which he'd canceled for an unmissable conference in Singapore. Lying in a hospital bed, he realized he had been sleepwalking. He had been so focused on building a monument for the future that he had failed to live in the house of the present. His recovery was long and difficult, but it was also a period of profound transformation. He didn't quit his job, he didn't sell his company and move to a monastery. The change was quieter, but far more fundamental. It was a change in priority, a change in attention. When he returned to work, his colleagues noticed a difference. He was still a sharp and effective leader, but the frantic, restless energy was gone. It was replaced by a calm, focused presence. He delegated more, trusting the team he had built. He cut meetings short if they weren't productive. He started leaving the office at 5 o'clock. The real change happened at home. He started taking a walk with his wife every evening after dinner, without their phones. He learned the song his daughter had tried to show him years ago, and they played it together, his clumsy notes mingling with her graceful ones. He helped his son build a new, much more ambitious model rocket, and when it soared into the sky, the look of pure, unadulterated joy on his face felt more valuable than any quarterly report he had ever read. He didn't need a near-death experience to keep the lesson alive. He made memento mori a daily practice. Every morning he would look in the mirror and remind himself, "This day is a gift. It is not a promise. It is the only one you have. Live it accordingly." The law of impermanence didn't make Marcus morbid. It made him alive. It taught him that the value of life is not measured in its duration, but in its depth. It's not about how many breaths you take, but about the moments that take your breath away. By remembering that everything ends, our successes, our failures, our relationships, our very lives, we are finally freed to appreciate them for what they are: precious, beautiful, and fleeting. Practice this. As you go about your day, gently remind yourself that this is temporary. This conversation, this meal, this moment of quiet, this frustrating traffic jam, it will all pass. This simple act of remembrance will infuse your world with a gratitude and a presence that is, in itself, an unshakable form of peace.
Law 4. The law of purposeful action. We have laid our foundation, learned to reframe obstacles, and made peace with impermanence. Now we must build. We must act. But how should we act in the world? The fourth law provides the compass. It is the law of purposeful action, the Stoic commitment to living with arete, or virtue. For the Stoics, a good life was not defined by what you achieved, but by the character you cultivated in the pursuit of your goals. Success, wealth, and fame were preferred indifferents. They were nice to have, but they had no bearing on your quality as a human being. The only true good was virtue. The only true failure was a failure of character. What is virtue? The Stoics broke it down into 4 cardinal components. 1. Wisdom, the ability to see the world clearly, to navigate complex situations with logic, reason, and a calm mind. 2. Justice, the commitment to treating others with fairness, integrity, and kindness, understanding our connection to the human community. 3. Courage, not just physical bravery, but the moral courage to stand up for what is right, to face our own flaws, and to endure hardship with grace. 4. Temperance, the practice of moderation, self-control, and balance in all things, avoiding the extremes of excess and deprivation. The law of purposeful action states that our primary goal in any situation, from the most monumental task to the most mundane chore, is not to achieve a specific outcome, but to act in accordance with these virtues. This radically shifts the source of our satisfaction. We cease to be dependent on external validation and instead find fulfillment in the quality of our own conduct. The world may not reward our actions, but we can find peace in knowing we acted rightly. This is the key to finding meaning in a world that often feels meaningless. Meaning is not something you find, it is something you bring to your actions. Consider the story of Javier, a man in his late 20s who worked as a barista in a busy downtown coffee shop. He felt trapped. He saw his job as a meaningless, repetitive series of tasks. Grind beans, pull shots, steam milk, take money, repeat. It was a temporary gig that had stretched into years, a waypoint that had become a destination. He felt invisible, a mere functionary in the daily caffeine rituals of people who were off to do important, meaningful things. He was bitter and adrift. One evening, while browsing the internet, he stumbled upon an article about Stoicism and the concept of virtue. The idea that meaning wasn't in the what, but in the how, intrigued him. He was skeptical, but he decided to try an experiment. For 1 week, he would treat his job not as a dead end, but as a Stoic training ground, a gymnasium for his character. On Monday, he decided to practice the virtue of wisdom. He stopped mindlessly going through the motions. He focused on his craft. He learned to distinguish the subtle notes in different coffee beans. He perfected the temperature and texture of his steamed milk. He learned the names and complicated orders of his regular customers, anticipating their needs before they even spoke. He transformed his station from an assembly line into a laboratory of precision and knowledge. He was no longer just a coffee maker. He was a craftsman.
On Tuesday, he focused on justice. This was not about grand legal theories. It was about human interaction. He made a conscious effort to treat every single person who came to his counter with genuine respect and fairness. The rushed CEO on his phone, the flustered tourist, the homeless man who came in just for a cup of water. He gave each of them his full, undivided attention. He made eye contact. He smiled. He treated them not as transactions, but as fellow human beings. He saw his role not as a servant, but as the purveyor of a small moment of dignity and warmth in their day. On Wednesday, he tackled courage. Where does a barista find courage? He found it in the small moments of friction. When a customer was unfairly rude because their order was taking too long during the morning rush, his old self would have become defensive or passive-aggressive. His new self took a deep breath, met the rudeness with unshakable calm, apologized for the delay without making excuses, and diffused the situation with grace. It was the moral courage to not let someone else's negativity poison his own character. On Thursday, he practiced temperance. The morning rush was chaos, a symphony of hissing machines, shouting orders, and relentless pressure. It was a daily invitation to become flustered, overwhelmed, and stressed. That day, Javier focused on his inner state. He moved with a deliberate, unhurried pace. He focused on one drink at a time. He controlled his breathing. He resisted the urge to get agitated or frantic. He became an island of calm in a sea of caffeine-fueled urgency. By Friday, something remarkable had happened. The coffee shop hadn't changed. The job hadn't changed. Javier had changed. He walked home that evening not with the familiar feeling of cynical exhaustion, but with a quiet sense of pride and satisfaction. He had not received a promotion. He had not gotten a raise. But he had spent his day well. He had acted with purpose. His customers noticed. The shop began to feel different. The atmosphere, once purely transactional, became warmer, more communal. People lingered, chatted with him, and treated him not as an invisible functionary, but as the pillar of their morning routine. Javier realized that his job was not meaningless. No job was. He had the power to infuse it with meaning through the virtues he chose to practice.
The law of purposeful action teaches us this profound truth. Our self-worth is not determined by our job title, our salary, or our social status. It is determined by the character we bring to our circumstances, whatever they may be. Whether you are a CEO or a barista, a parent or a student, a leader or a follower, every moment is an opportunity to practice wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. This is how you build an unshakable mind. You anchor your worth in the one thing that can never be taken from you, your own character. Let the world grant or deny you its rewards as it will. Your purpose is to act rightly. In that, you will find a satisfaction so deep and so stable that no external event can ever touch it.
Law 5. The law of empathetic detachment. We have built the foundations, reframed our obstacles, accepted impermanence, and found our purpose in virtuous action. Now we must turn our gaze outward to our relationship with the 78 billion other souls on this planet. Navigating the complex, often frustrating world of human interaction is one of the greatest challenges to our inner peace. The fifth law gives us a tool for this. It is the law of empathetic detachment, born from the Stoic concept of sympatheia. Sympatheia is the belief that all things are interconnected, woven together in a single vast tapestry of cause and effect. We are not isolated individuals, but members of a single organism, the human cosmos. Every person we meet is fighting a hard battle, guided by their own beliefs, fears, and flawed perceptions. To be angry or frustrated with them for acting according to their nature is, as Marcus Aurelius wrote, as absurd as being angry at a fig tree for producing figs. The law of empathetic detachment asks us to do two things simultaneously. First, to practice empathy by striving to understand why people do what they do, to look past their frustrating actions and see the flawed reasoning, the hidden pain, or the ignorant perspective that drives them. Second, to practice detachment by recognizing that their actions, their opinions, and their emotional states belong to them, not to us. They are outside our inner citadel. We can strive to understand them without allowing their negativity to breach our own tranquility. This is a delicate balance. It is not cold, unfeeling distance, nor is it a spongy absorption of other people's problems. It is a compassionate understanding paired with a firm guarding of our own inner peace. It is the ability to say, I understand why you are acting this way, and I will not allow your turmoil to become my own. Think of Sarah, a dedicated high school history teacher. She began her career with a fiery passion, an idealistic vision of inspiring young minds. But after a decade in the classroom, that fire had dwindled to a flicker. She was burning out, consumed by a daily battle against student apathy. She would prepare engaging lessons, find fascinating primary sources, and craft thought-provoking questions, only to be met with blank stares, students scrolling on their phones under their desks, or the low hum of indifferent chatter. Every day she felt it as a personal insult. They don't care, she would complain to her husband. They're lazy. They don't appreciate the effort. Why do I even bother? Her frustration was poisoning her. It seeped into her lessons, giving them a bitter, resentful edge. Her peace of mind was entirely dependent on the validation and engagement of a room full of unpredictable teenagers, a battle she was destined to lose. One summer, while reading some philosophy, she encountered the Stoic view from above. It's a mental exercise where you imagine yourself floating up, out of your immediate situation. You see your classroom, then your school, your city, your country, until the entire planet is a swirling blue marble below. From this vantage point, you see all of humanity, with all its struggles, its joys, its follies, all interconnected. Sarah decided to try this as a practical tool. The next time she stood before her class, facing a sea of bored faces, she mentally took a step back. She didn't just see lazy students. She tried to see the individuals. That boy in the back row staring out the window? Perhaps he hadn't eaten breakfast, or his parents had been fighting all night. His apathy wasn't an attack on her lesson. It was a shield against a world that was overwhelming him. That girl who was constantly whispering to her friend, perhaps she was deeply insecure, and that social connection was the only thing that made her feel safe in the turbulent world of high school. The student who challenged her with a cynical question, perhaps he was just trying to forge his own identity by testing the boundaries of authority. She started to see their behavior not as a personal affront, but as the figs produced by their individual trees. These were young people navigating a complex world of social pressure, hormonal changes, and anxieties about the future, all amplified by the relentless noise of social media. Of course, they weren't always going to be fascinated by the intricacies of the Peloponnesian War. This was the empathy part. The detachment part came next. She realized that their engagement was not within her control. Her responsibility was to prepare and deliver the best lesson she possibly could, with passion and integrity. That was her inner citadel. Their reception of it was outside her walls. This shift was transformative. It freed her. She stopped teaching for their approval and started teaching for the love of her subject and in service of her own principles. Her energy changed. The bitter, needy edge to her voice was replaced by a calm, confident passion. She no longer saw her students as adversaries in a battle for attention, but as fellow travelers on a difficult journey whom she had the privilege of guiding for a short time. She would still challenge them. She would still hold them to high standards, but she did so from a place of compassionate understanding, not resentful frustration. And a strange thing happened. As her need for their validation decreased, their engagement began to increase. The students could sense that she was no longer fighting them. She was there with them. They responded to her authentic passion, now unclouded by her own emotional turmoil. Sarah didn't become a perfect teacher, and her class didn't become a utopia of scholarly focus, but she had reclaimed her peace. She had learned to look at the often frustrating tapestry of human behavior with empathetic eyes while keeping her own mind a sanctuary of calm. She had mastered the art of being in the world, but not letting the world's chaos be in her. Law 6. The law of premeditated adversity. We have built a strong, virtuous mind, capable of navigating the present moment with grace. But what of the future? The future, with its endless potential for misfortune, is one of the primary sources of modern anxiety. We are tormented by what-ifs. What if I lose my job? What if I get sick? What if my relationship ends? The sixth law provides a powerful, counterintuitive antidote to this fear. It is the law of premeditated adversity, or what the Stoics called premeditatio malorum. Simply put, this law instructs us to periodically and deliberately contemplate the worst-case scenarios in our lives, not to dwell on them in a state of morbid anxiety, but to calmly and rationally rehearse them in our minds. We imagine what we would do if we lost the things we hold most dear. What would it be like to lose our wealth, our reputation, our health, or even our loved ones? This sounds like a recipe for misery, but its effect is the exact opposite. It works in three powerful ways. First, it inoculates us against the shock of future misfortune. By mentally rehearsing disaster, we rob it of its greatest weapon, surprise. If the worst should happen, it will not be an entirely unfamiliar landscape. We have already scouted the territory in our minds, and while the reality will be painful, we will not be paralyzed by the initial terror and confusion. Second, it fosters immense gratitude for what we have right now. By imagining life without our job, we come to appreciate the security and purpose it provides today. By contemplating the loss of a loved one, we are reminded to cherish their presence in this very moment, to not take them for granted. It turns the mundane into the miraculous. And third, and most importantly, it reveals our own resilience. As we walk through these worst-case scenarios in our imagination, we almost always discover something profound. We would survive. We would adapt. We would find a way forward. We realize our inner strength is not dependent on our external circumstances. We build confidence in our ability to endure. Let us meet Anya, an aspiring entrepreneur with a brilliant idea for a sustainable packaging company. For over a year, she had poured every ounce of her energy and savings into developing a prototype and a business plan. The next step was the most terrifying, pitching her startup to a group of powerful venture capitalists. The fear of failure was a physical weight on her chest. It paralyzed her. She would lie awake at night, her mind racing with 100 humiliating scenarios. She imagined them laughing at her presentation. She imagined them picking apart her financial projections. She imagined the crushing email rejection, the condescending, "It's not a good fit for us at this time." The fear was so intense that it made her want to cancel the meeting, to retreat to the safety of her old, unfulfilling corporate job. Her fear was not of failure itself, but of the unknown, shocking pain of that failure. Her mentor, a seasoned entrepreneur who had seen both spectacular successes and devastating failures, gave her an unusual piece of advice. "Stop running from the fear, Anya. Tonight, I want you to invite it in for dinner. I want you to actively, deliberately, and in great detail live out your worst-case scenario." Hesitantly, Anya agreed. That evening, she sat in a quiet room with a pen and paper. She closed her eyes and began the premeditatio malorum. First, she imagined the pitch itself. She pictured herself fumbling her words, the projector malfunctioning, the investors looking at their phones, bored and unimpressed. She felt the hot flush of shame as they cut her off mid-sentence with a dismissive, "Thank you, we've heard enough." Then she followed the thread. What happens next? In her mind, she walked out of the gleaming office building into the rain, the rejection feeling like a physical blow. She went home to her small apartment, which was now filled with prototypes that seemed like pathetic monuments to her foolishness. What then? She had quit her job for this. Her savings were nearly gone. She imagined having to call her parents, admitting she had failed, asking if she could move back into her childhood bedroom. She pictured selling her car to pay her bills. She envisioned having to go back to her old boss, head hung low, and ask for any job he could give her, enduring the "I told you so" looks from her former colleagues. She let herself feel the full weight of the imagined humiliation, the loss, the despair. She let the tears come. She wrote it all down, every painful detail. But then she asked the crucial Stoic question, and then what? So she's back in her parents' house. Is her life over? No. She would be safe. She would be fed. After a few weeks of mourning her dream, what would she do? She would start looking for a new job. With her skills, she would find one eventually. It might not be her dream job, but it would pay the bills. She would start saving again. She would still have her health. She would still have the love of her family and friends who, in this imagined future, were not judging her, but supporting her. She would still have the immense knowledge and experience she gained from building her startup. The idea itself was still good. Perhaps she could try again in a few years, but smarter this time. When she opened her eyes, the room was dark, and the paper was filled with her notes. But the heavy, paralyzing fear in her chest was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet, solid calm. She had faced the monster in her imagination, and she had discovered it was not all-powerful. She had looked into the abyss, and the abyss had shown her that she had the strength to climb back out. She walked into the pitch meeting the next day with a completely different energy. She was not there seeking validation. She was not desperate for their approval. She was there to present her vision with clarity and passion. Because she was no longer afraid of the outcome, she was fully present, confident, and authentic. She answered their tough questions not with defensiveness, but with calm assurance. Ironically, this very lack of fear is what made her so compelling. The investors saw not a desperate founder, but a resilient and confident leader. They funded her company. But the true victory was not the funding. The true victory had happened the night before, in that quiet room. She had built an unshakable mind by showing it that it was capable of withstanding the worst the world could throw at it. Practice this law. Once a week or once a month, take a few minutes to contemplate the loss of something you value. Do not do it to create anxiety, but to foster gratitude and to remind yourself of your own inner resilience. You will discover, as Anya did, that the fear of the thing is almost always more painful than the thing itself. And by facing that fear willingly, you rob it of all its power.
Law 7. The law of the tranquil response. Our inner citadel is built. We have reframed our obstacles, accepted impermanence, found our virtuous purpose, learned to deal with others, and prepared for future adversity. But the world will still find ways to test us. In the heat of the moment, a single unfiltered reaction can undo all our hard work. A flash of anger, a surge of panic, a wave of despair, these are the internal rebellions that can overthrow our peace. The seventh law is our defense against this. It is the law of the tranquil response, rooted in the Stoic discipline of assent. The Stoics taught that we do not react to events themselves, but to our judgments or impressions about those events. Something happens. We then have an immediate, involuntary first impression. This is terrible. This is an insult. This is a disaster. The crucial moment, the space where our freedom lies, is between that first impression and our assent, the moment we agree with it and allow it to become a full-blown emotion. The law of the tranquil response is the practice of creating a pause in that space. It is the art of catching that first impression, holding it at arm's length, and interrogating it before we give it our assent. We must learn to speak to our impressions as if they are separate from us. We ask them, "Are you really true? Are you an accurate representation of reality, or are you a product of my fear, my ego, my conditioning? Do I have to agree with you?" Most of the time, our first impressions are irrational exaggerations. An unshakable mind is not a mind that doesn't have these impressions. That would be inhuman. It is a mind that has mastered the art of not automatically consenting to them. It maintains its tranquility by refusing to be swept away by the initial tide of emotion. Let's observe this law in the crucible of daily life through the story of David, a mid-level manager at a marketing firm. David was a good man and a competent manager, but he had one significant flaw, a short temper. He saw it as a sign that he cared, that he had high standards. In reality, it was a weakness, a crack in his foundation that sent tremors through his entire team. One afternoon, a junior employee named Ben made a significant mistake. He had accidentally sent a client proposal with an incorrect budget, a figure that was $10,000 too low. When David discovered the error, his first impression detonated in his mind like a flash grenade.
He spoke to the first one. "Is this really a catastrophe?" he asked himself. Is the company going to fold? Am I going to be fired? Is anyone physically harmed? The answer was no. It was a serious, costly mistake, but it wasn't a true catastrophe. It was a problem to be solved. He refused to assent to the panic. He turned to the second impression. Will this make me look like a fool? Perhaps, for a moment, he conceded. But what would make me look more foolish? Losing my temper and creating a scene? Or handling this difficult situation with professionalism and grace? He realized that his long-term reputation as a leader was far more important than a short-term moment of embarrassment. He refused to assent to the ego-driven fear. Finally, he examined the third impression. Do I need to yell at Ben? What will that accomplish, he wondered. It will make me feel powerful for a moment, but it will make him feel small and afraid. It won't undo the mistake. It won't prevent future mistakes. In fact, it might make them more likely, as my team will become too scared to take initiative or report problems. He saw that anger was not a solution. It was an indulgence. He refused to assent to the impulse. Having dismantled his initial, flawed judgments, he could now approach the situation from his inner citadel, from a place of reason and virtue. He called his boss first, explained the mistake calmly and professionally, and took full responsibility as the head of the team. He then called the client, apologized for the error, and worked out a solution. Only then did he walk over to Ben's desk. Ben saw him coming and physically flinched, preparing for the inevitable tirade. But David's voice was calm. Ben, he said, I need you to walk me through how the budget error happened on the proposal. I want to understand the process so we can build a safeguard to make sure this doesn't happen again. There was no yelling, no blame, just a collaborative focus on the problem. Ben, immensely relieved, was able to explain his mistake clearly. Together they identified a flaw in their workflow and designed a new double-check system. The crisis was averted, and the team's process was made stronger because of it. David had turned a moment of potential anger and division into a moment of mentorship and improvement. He had mastered the tranquil response. He had created that crucial pause between stimulus and reaction, and in that pause he had found his power. He had chosen reason over rage, wisdom over wrath. This is your practice. When you feel the sting of an insult, the panic of a setback, or the heat of frustration, pause. Do not assent immediately. Question your first impression. Ask if it is true, if it is helpful, if it is worthy of you. Most of the time, you will find it is not. In that sacred pause, you will find your tranquility. You will find your unshakable mind.
The eighth law is our system of mental maintenance. It is the law of reflective practice, embodied in the Stoic tradition of the philosophical diary or journal. This is not a diary for simply recording the events of the day. Today I went to the store, then I had a meeting. A Stoic journal is an active analytical tool. It is the time we set aside each day, preferably in the quiet of the evening, to review our own thoughts, actions, and judgments. It is where we become the objective observer of our own lives, the architect inspecting the integrity of their creation. The practice is simple but profound. It involves asking a series of probing questions about our conduct throughout the day. The Roman Stoic Seneca, in his letters, described his own evening routine. He would review his entire day, asking himself, what fault did I cure today? What vice did I resist? In what way am I better? We can adapt this for our modern lives with three core questions. 1. What did I do poorly today, according to my own principles? This is not about self-flagellation. It is about honest, unflinching self-assessment. Where did I assent to a negative impression? Where did I fail to control my temper? Where did I act out of fear or ego instead of virtue? Where did I fail to distinguish what was in my control from what was not? 2. What did I do well today, according to my own principles? It is equally important to acknowledge our victories, no matter how small. Where did I pause before reacting? Where did I show patience when it was difficult? Where did I choose courage over comfort? Where did I reframe an obstacle as an opportunity? 3. What can I learn for tomorrow? What specific situation might I face, and how can I prepare to handle it with more wisdom and virtue? This question turns reflection into preparation. It is forward-looking. We learn from the mistakes and successes of the past to become better in the future. This daily practice is the mechanism by which all the other laws are integrated and strengthened. It is one thing to understand these principles intellectually. It is another thing entirely to live them consistently. The reflective journal is the bridge between theory and practice. It is the crucible where self-awareness is forged. Consider Maya, a college student drowning in the pressures of academic life. She was perpetually overwhelmed. She was stressed about her grades, anxious about her social life, and uncertain about her future. Her mind was a chaotic whirlwind of unprocessed thoughts and emotions. She felt like a victim of her circumstances, tossed about by the daily demands of her life. On the recommendation of a professor, she started a simple evening journaling practice based on the Stoic model. At first it felt awkward and pointless. Her first few entries were generic. Did poorly, procrastinated on my paper, did well, went to the gym, learn, start paper earlier. But she stuck with it, and slowly, as she became more honest with herself, the practice began to reveal profound patterns.
Under "What did I do poorly?" she began to notice a recurring theme. She would write things like, "I was snappy with my roommate because I was stressed about my exam," or "I felt a surge of envy when I saw Sarah's post about her internship and it ruined my mood for an hour." She realized, through the act of writing it down, that she was consistently violating the law of the inner citadel. She was allowing external events, an exam, a social media post, to dictate her inner state and her treatment of others. Under "What did I do well?" she started to find small, almost imperceptible moments of progress. A friend canceled our lunch plans. My first impression was to be annoyed, but I paused and remembered it wasn't in my control. I used the extra hour to study and felt peaceful about it. By writing these down, she began to see that she did have the capacity for tranquility. She was not powerless. These small wins, once recorded, became a source of strength. The most powerful section became, "What can I learn for tomorrow?" It transformed her from a reactive victim into a proactive architect of herself. She wrote, "Tomorrow I have a big presentation. I will probably feel nervous. That's a natural first impression. I will not assent to panic. I will focus only on what I can control, knowing my material and speaking clearly. The audience's reaction is not my concern." She was now using premeditatio malorum, Law 6, and the law of the tranquil response, Law 7, in a conscious, preparatory way. Over the course of a semester, Maya's journal became a testament to her own transformation. It was a private, sacred space where she could dismantle her anxieties, challenge her own flawed judgments, celebrate her growth, and consciously build the person she wanted to be. The external pressures of college life hadn't vanished. The exams were still hard, the social dynamics still complex, but the chaotic whirlwind in her mind had subsided. She had untangled her thoughts. She had learned to see herself not as a collection of random reactive emotions, but as a conscious being with principles and the power to live by them. The journal was her workshop, her maintenance schedule, her daily conversation with the architect within. This is the 8th law. Do not let your days simply blur into one another. Do not let your mistakes go unexamined and your successes go unacknowledged. Take 10 minutes every evening. Pick up a pen and a notebook or open a blank document. Put your day on trial. Be a kind but firm judge. Review your adherence to these laws.
This simple act of reflective practice is what makes a philosophy a way of life. It is how we ensure that the unshakable mind we are building today remains strong, sound, and serene for all the days to come. Here arrives the final law, the capstone of our entire structure. This is the law that binds all the others together and elevates them from a mere strategy for endurance into a profound art of living. It is the law of the unconquerable self, expressed in the two most powerful words in the Stoic lexicon, amor fati, love your fate. This is the most challenging and the most rewarding of all the laws. It goes beyond merely accepting or enduring what happens. It goes beyond reframing obstacles into opportunities. Amor fati is the practice of actively, enthusiastically, and unconditionally loving everything that happens in your life. The good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, the triumphs and the tragedies. You are to see it all not as a series of random events to be judged, but as a necessary and perfect unfolding of the cosmos, a story in which you are a vital character, and your only task is to play your part with virtue and grace. This is the ninth law, amor fati, love your fate.
Why is this so powerful? Because it is the ultimate expression of the law of the inner citadel. If you can truly love whatever happens, then by definition, nothing can harm you. An event can only be bad if you judge it to be so. But if your default position is love, if you see every event as a new lesson, a new challenge, a new and essential piece of your life's tapestry, then you are rendered invincible. Your peace is no longer contingent on anything external. You have found the source of tranquility entirely within yourself. This is not a passive resignation. It is an active, joyful embrace of reality as it is. It is saying yes to life in its totality. It is the ultimate alignment with nature and with fate. The embodiment of this law is often found not in philosophers, but in those who have lived long and seen much. Consider the story of Silas, an old man who had tended the same community garden for over 60 years. The garden was his life's work, a small patch of green in the heart of a bustling city. Silas had seen everything. He had seen years of perfect gentle rain and abundant harvests that filled the neighborhood with fresh produce. And he had seen years of devastating drought that baked the soil into a cracked, barren landscape. He had seen sudden violent hailstorms that shredded tender leaves in minutes. He had seen his garden flourish, and he had seen it fail. Younger gardeners would often despair. They would curse the lack of rain. They would rage against the blight. They would mourn their withered plants and see the bad years as a personal failure, an injustice from a cruel and indifferent universe. But Silas was different. He was never seen to be angry or despondent about the state of his garden. He moved with the same calm, deliberate pace in the years of drought as he did in the years of plenty.
A few years later, the opposite occurred. A season of relentless rain left the garden a flooded, muddy mess. Roots rotted, plants drowned. This time, Elena found Silas happily digging a new drainage channel. "This flood," she lamented. "It's even worse than the drought." Silas smiled, pausing to lean on his shovel. "Ah, the flood," he said, with that same strange fondness. "Look what it brings." He scooped up a handful of dark, wet earth. "It brings new soil from upstream, full of nutrients. It washes away the old pests. It shows us where the low points in our garden are, where we need to build things up. It's a messy business, but the garden will be more fertile next year because of it. I love the flood for the gifts it leaves behind." Over the years, Elena realized that Silas loved every season, every event, every fate that befell his garden. He loved the gentle years for their ease and beauty. He loved the hard years for the strength and wisdom they forged in both him and his plants. He did not merely tolerate his fate, he embraced it. He saw every event, whether he would have chosen it or not, as a necessary and valuable part of the whole. He never wished for a different reality than the one he was in. This was his secret. His peace did not come from a successful harvest. His peace came from his unconditional yes to whatever the harvest turned out to be. He was the unconquerable self. This is the ninth and final law. It is the practice of looking at your own life, your successes and your failures, your joys and your sorrows, your strengths and your weaknesses, and saying, "This is mine, all of it, and I love it, for it has made me who I am." Love the job you lost, for the resilience it taught you. Love the relationship that ended, for the wisdom it gave you. Love the mistake that embarrassed you, for the humility it fostered. Love the difficult and challenging parts of your journey as much as the easy ones, for they are what have carved you into a person of depth and character. Amor fati, love your fate. This is the capstone. This is the final seal on your inner citadel. With this law in place, your mind is not just unshakable, it is truly, finally, and completely free. Conclusion: the architect of the self. We began this journey with the image of an architect designing a building to withstand an earthquake. We spoke of a structure that doesn't fight the shaking, but learns to move with it, becoming stronger under pressure. Over the course of our time together, we have laid out the complete blueprint for that structure, the inner citadel of an unshakable mind. We did not offer you platitudes or wishful thinking. We offered you laws, 9 timeless, battle-tested principles of architecture for the human soul. These laws are not a destination you arrive at, but a practice you inhabit, a set of tools you use every day to build and maintain your own inner peace. Let us walk through the blueprint one final time, to solidify it in our minds. First, we laid the foundation with the law of the inner citadel. We drew a firm line between what is ours to control, our thoughts, our actions, our character, and what is not. We resolved to invest our precious energy only in our own sovereign kingdom.
Second, we framed our walls with the law of perceptive reframing. We learned that no event is inherently good or bad. We embraced the alchemical power of our own minds to see every obstacle not as a barrier, but as the raw material for strength and virtue. Third, we consecrated the ground with the law of impermanence. By holding the quiet truth of memento mori in our hearts, we stripped away the non-essential, cultivating a profound gratitude for the present moment and an urgent focus on what truly matters. Fourth, we raised the pillars with the law of purposeful action. We understood that true meaning is not found in what we do, but in the character, the wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance we bring to our every action. We anchored our self-worth in our own virtue. Fifth, we installed the windows with the law of empathetic detachment. Through the lens of sympathia, we learned to see others with compassion and understanding, while maintaining a firm boundary to protect our own tranquility from their turmoil. Sixth, we engineered our seismic dampers with the law of premeditated adversity. By courageously visualizing worst-case scenarios, we inoculated ourselves against the shock of future misfortune, fostered gratitude, and discovered the depths of our own resilience. Seventh, we fortified the gates with the law of the tranquil response. We mastered the sacred pause between impression and assent, learning to interrogate our initial reactions and choosing to respond with reason and calm instead of being hijacked by emotion. Eighth,
We established our maintenance plan with the law of reflective practice. Through the daily ritual of the philosophical journal, we created a system for honest self-assessment, reinforcing our principles and turning theory into a lived reality. And finally, we placed the capstone on our creation with the law of the unconquerable self. We embraced the ultimate freedom of amor fati, learning not just to accept, but to love everything that happens, rendering our inner peace unconditional and absolute. This is your blueprint. The work of construction is now yours. It is not easy work. It requires daily vigilance, constant practice, and profound honesty with yourself. There will be days when the old rigid structures of your mind try to reassert themselves. You will feel the tremors of anger, anxiety, and fear. You will forget the laws. You will falter. But the blueprint is always here. When you feel yourself trying to control the uncontrollable, return to the first law. When you face an obstacle that feels unsurmountable, return to the second. When you find yourself drowning in frustration with another person, return to the fifth. Each law is a tool waiting for you to pick it up. You are the architect of yourself. Life will provide the seismic tests. The world will shake. It will always shake. But you no longer need to fear the tremor. You have the design. You have the principles. You have the power to build a sanctuary within you that is so well-founded, so flexible, and so deeply rooted in virtue that the chaos of the world can only serve to reveal its strength. Go now and build. Build a mind that is not hard but resilient, not unfeeling but tranquil, not lucky but unconquerable. Build a self that can stand firm, not by resisting the earthquakes of life, but by having learned, finally and forever, how to dance with them.